Good afternoon. Welcome to Beyond the Headlines, a regular feature of the Post and Courier, where we take you behind the scenes here at the news organization and talk a little bit about what we've been working on and the stories that are in the news. I'm Mitch Pugh, the executive editor with the Post and Courier. And today I'm joined by David Cloninger, who covers University of South Carolina sports out of our Columbia office, and Jon Bleau, who is our new Clemson beat writer covering the Clemson Tigers out of Greenville / Clemson, I guess. We do have an office up there in Greenville. So a couple of things we want to talk about today. One is to introduce you to these two fine gentlemen and talk a little bit about what they do on a daily basis, but also about two new products that we've launched here with the Post and Courier. David's the author of Gamecocks Now, which is a new newsletter that takes our audience behind the scenes, gives them exclusive access to covering the team, the University of South Carolina Gamecocks, gets you into the viewpoint of the sports writer to see what it's like to cover the team up close. It's a paid newsletter, so it's a little bit different. So if you're an existing subscriber, you can pay $1 extra a month and get access to that newsletter. And if you're not an existing subscriber, you can sign in at postandcourier.com for $5.99 a month or $39.99 a year. Same thing for Jon. He's doing the exact same, well, probably not the exact same, but a similar approach with the Tiger Take, which he's relatively new again on the Clemson beat. Just started about a week and a half ago, so he'll take you along as he covers the team, gets to know Dabo Swinney and crew as football season kicks off. And again, take our readers behind the scenes more and into what it's like to cover the team, get exclusive access, pictures, information that you wouldn't get just by reading the Post and Courier. So I'm going to start with talking to both David and Jon a little bit about how they got here and their experience, and then we'll talk a little bit about what each newsletter is going to do. So I want to start with you, David. You've been covering University of South Carolina sports for quite some time. One might even call you the dean of the South Carolina sports beat writer group. But tell us a little bit about your background and how long you've been covering the team, and maybe kind of start to talk a little bit about what readers can expect from Gamecocks Now.
Well, you're definitely right about that, Mitch. I've been on the South Carolina beat for quite a long time on a lot of different outlets. You can tell from my gray hair, exactly what I've covered over the past 20 some odd years. But this will be my fifth football season with the Post and Courier, and you'll get everything that's going on at USC. For instance, if you subscribe to the newsletter, there was a new one that came out this morning. We had a scoop in there about Scott Wingo coming to join the baseball team as their new volunteer assistant coach. And then, of course, we had an update on Gamecocks in the Olympics, and then about what's going on into preseason practice. So, pretty much I take it that on the USC beat, if it's happening with a Gamecock uniform on it, I'm going to know about it. And I'm going to get it to you. Of course, I can't be everywhere at once. Of course, I can't do everything that I'd like to do because I'm one person. But I try to get all of the main sports as much as we can, and also a lot of the inside stuff that's going on that maybe you're not privy to. That's what you'll get from my daily coverage and from my newsletter coverage.
That's great. That's great. And Jon, you're in a little bit different situation. You're walking in. You've covered the University of Indiana for the last several years. You want to talk a little bit about what your background in sports journalism is and kind of what you're looking forward to exploring with the Tiger Take.
Yeah, so I am from Mount Laurel, New Jersey, went to Penn State, had a little bit of a weird roundabout journey. I went to NFL Films for 3 seasons, kind of worked on an X's and O's show there, but then eventually got to hop into journalism like I wanted to. Spent 9 years at the Herald Times in Bloomington, Indiana. The first couple of years as a news reporter in high school sports, and then covering IU, like you said, for the last couple of years. So I actually had a really exciting time covering IU. IU football was the talk of the town the last couple of years. Actually made January bowl games in back-to-back years, which for IU is a big deal. I know Clemson, that's not as much of a big deal. It's a normal thing. But obviously, yeah, great opportunity here to cover Clemson, a team that's been in the college football playoff for the last 6 years. It was kind of hard to turn down. So here I am. And yeah, like you said, I'm kind of learning my way here. I don't even have a sofa in my apartment yet. That's coming at 2 p.m. And we have the first practice tomorrow, Friday. to kind of meet Dabo and the team. So I'll be kind of taking you along the newsletter as a guy from New Jersey via Indiana, kind of learn South Carolina and Clemson and what this whole thing's about.
That's great. So, the first thing I think we need to make sure is that in one of these newsletters, we get a picture of the new couch.
The sectional actually is going to have a nice little chase at the end of it.
Nice. So, John, obviously you're going to be learning a lot along the way, not just about, Clemson football and sports, but, South Carolina barbecue and other things. What would you like from readers and folks who follow either the Post and Courier or your newsletter? How can they help you as you embark on this journey?
Yeah, I mean, that's the really cool thing about newsletters, that you're going to have access to me, but, I also somewhat have access to you. I mean, if you have story ideas, if you have feedback, critique, I mean, anything, I kind of really accept the fact that I'm a new guy here. I'm kind of humble about that. I do not know everything. A lot of you guys who are readers might know more than me right now. You might have an idea for a story. You might have a tip, something that I heard, and I think this might be a good idea to look into. Or you might just have criticism and say, well, that was completely off, John. Why did you even say that? Why would you say that this type of barbecue is good or bad? I don't know. You'll be able to indulge in a little bit of criticism as well. I'm open to all of it. So yeah, no, it's great having that access to each other. I think that will be really beneficial in my role as kind of like the new guy. So
that's great.
Word of advice, John, tread lightly when you talk about barbecue, and that's for instance, I get to go to Texas every couple of years, and when I order barbecue and they bring me beef, and I'm like, this isn't right. It's supposed to be pork. Yeah, they threatened to throw me out the last time I did that. Just,
Okay.
comes.
Well, before I ask some more questions, I just want to tell everyone who's on the call, first of all, thank you for joining us today. If you'd like to ask a question, down on the bottom of the screen, there's a Q&A feature. Just pop in there, ask your question, and in a few minutes, I'll get to reader questions. We had some come in prior to the webinar today, so we'll get to some of those too, and we'll talk a little sports here too in just a few minutes. But David, before we do that, I wanted to ask you. I obviously you've been here a little bit longer than John, and so I know a little bit more about you. And I've heard you on the radio. I've read your stories, and one of the things I've always appreciated about how you approach the beat is that you sort of approach it both as a journalist, but also kind of trying to think about what does a fan want to know, what do they care about, and I feel like you do a really great job of speaking and sort of maybe sometimes in that voice or to that voice. Can you tell me a little bit about how you approach that and what your philosophy is there?
Oh, sure, Mitch. I mean, obviously, in the business, we remain neutral. There's no cheering in the press box. That's a cardinal rule. But an old sports editor of mine, Gary McCann, at the Rockville Herald, once told me it's never wrong to cheer for a better story. And of course, a better story is always one where the team wins. So you go into every press box thinking, you might see something amazing, you might not, but you always got to have that enthusiasm that if they do pull off something shocking, if they do, something that's never been done before, that you can relay that to your readers. And of course, I get emails and tweets all the time about why can't they do this? Why can't they do that? And I try to find those answers and then give them out to the readership base. So, the past 2 years, especially in football season, it hasn't been very fun. And I've tried to relay that as well, because how many times can you write, boy, the Gamecocks got blown out today? And hey, here's what's going on behind the scenes. I mean, specifically coming back from the Ole Miss game last year, it was a bad game. They got blown out again. That was a night game. I remember seeing the school president, the athletic director, and the athletic director's second in command talking on the sideline as the game ended. They were talking still there as the lights in the stadium went out. And I thought, oh, this is not going to be good. So that was an 8-hour drive the next day. I spent every minute of it on my phone because I knew that Will Muschamp was probably going to get fired that day. And you could see it as how I was filing report after report back. It looks to be okay. They're going to wait till the end of the season. Oh, wait, there's a team meeting. Oh, wait, practice has been delayed. Until finally I got back to Columbia, and then there were about an hour later, yeah, he's out. So that's just kind of the things that I try to relay to everybody and just say, this is what it's going to be. It can be a bumpy ride. It can be a very pleasant ride. But throughout all of it, I'm going to be in the roller coaster car with you.
That's one of the things I'm excited about with these newsletters is sometimes when you're running a full news story, you might have 2 sentences worth of news, not worth, posting a full-blown news story, but if you've got the newsletter, you can fire that off to the folks who subscribe, let them know what you're hearing, what's happening, responsibly, of course. I think that's going to be really, really interesting. John, you heard David talk a little bit about that, and obviously you've covered at Indiana. For those in South Carolina who don't know, a very passionate fan base, especially about its basketball. How do you approach that relationship and back and forth with the folks who not only are just reading because they're interested, but are really the hardcore fans of the team?
Yeah, I mean, I try to be pretty active on Twitter. And like you said, it's a hardcore, passionate fan base. I've lost about 800 followers since I came here because IU people do not want to see anything about Clemson. But, you build that rapport with your base. And I hope to do that with the Clemson fans as well. I mean, in terms of just being on it, just any news that's there, getting it up quick, letting you guys know about it. Having a little bit of fun as well. I try to have a sense of humor about things. This is sports. This isn't, the end of the world with most stuff. But then also just in terms of what I write, I like to be very in depth. That's kind of what I pride myself in. I think this is really at its heart a blue collar profession. It's the people who spend the most time talking to sources and spend the most time on their sentences and end up with the best stories. And I've usually been able to produce some really, really deep stuff with stuff that's way beyond the box score. I think I wrote about it in this upcoming newsletter that's coming out. Some of my best stories were about like the director of player development who met his long lost sister at a Nebraska game. That's not anything to do with the game. It's just that his family history and who he was. Tom Allen, his very first high school team back in Temple Heights in Florida, that was terrible. And he led them as a 24-year-old coach to a state tournament berth. It was kind of the forerunner to what we saw at Indiana. Just trying to figure out who these coaches and players are as people, so you can relate to them better and also know more about them as people and kind of get more of kind of a look and an understanding of why the things that are happening on the field are happening. And that's kind of what I try to do as a reporter.
Makes total sense. I'm going to start jumping into some questions. The first one will kind of be a little bit more about the journalism side. And I know I've got some football questions because, as we all know, in South Carolina, football is king, and we're almost there. But the first question comes from the Byerly Foundation, someone over there. This is for David. So, David, you've been around a long time, and this person's thinking of like Rick Henry at WIS, who's also been around a long time. Wants to know, how is the relationship among reporters who cover the team? What's that like? You're interacting with competitors, but you guys are all friends too. Can you tell us a little about what that's like?
Well, you said it, Mitch. We are all competing for the same stories, but we also, for the most part, always get along. Of course, when you're in close quarters with anybody, there might be a couple of times where you have a tiff with somebody, but you always talk it out because generally we're all in the same room, the same arenas, the same press boxes, and we're all basically doing a lot of the same stories. It's just in different words. So there is constant competition, but I can say that I have a very good relationship with all the people on the USC beat, and it's gone through a lot of change over the past few years. Like they said, to the person who asked the question, Rick Henry and I, John Whittle from the Big Spur, Josh Kendall used to be at the State, now he's at the Athletic. All of us are kind of the old heads on the beat. So it's kind of getting used to everybody else coming in, but it's always a good time because, as you know, we're all in it together, even though we're all trying to beat each other.
Okay, I'm going to jump into some sports questions. So the first one comes from Corey Swindler, and this is for John. Questions: if Clemson falls to Georgia, will a record of 12-1 with an ACC championship get them into the playoffs? We're already talking playoffs, and it's August 5th. What do you think?
Yeah, they've made it 6 straight times. So, why wouldn't we be talking about it? But yeah, that's a good question. I think most likely, yes. Georgia obviously is the marquee game on the schedule, but if you're able to pick up and win the rest of the games in convincing fashion, as you would expect with a Clemson, and you win the ACC championship game, which would probably be against a team like a North Carolina, probably, let's say, that is a nice win on your schedule that gets you into the CFP, I would think. If you win that Georgia game, the benefit of it is that you have a little bit of a mulligan going through the season. You have that marquee win there. Maybe you can mess up a little bit and kind of recover and still make it. So I would think so. But yeah, if you lose that Georgia game, you are going to be walking a fine line the rest of the season. You can't look bad going undefeated the rest of the way, if that's possible.
Gotcha. So this is for David. Mitch Bailey wants to know. He thinks USC may win a couple more games than he calls them the so-called experts say. He's been seeing an over/under of 3.5 wins for the Gamecocks this year. What do you think?
I mean, it's hard to not understand where whoever said that, where they're coming from, just because this is a team that's won 6 games in 2 years. They had a coaching change. They had a lot of roster turnover. And you look at the schedule, the roster that they have coming back and think, don't know how that's going to be. Personally, I think that the absolute ceiling for this team is 5-7, realistically 4-8. Now, before anybody starts logging off, I will say this. First 4 games. You got Eastern Illinois at home, at East Carolina, at Georgia, and then home against Kentucky. If they somehow go 3-1 in those first 4 games, you still have Troy on the schedule. You still have Vanderbilt on the schedule. You think, well, that's 5. And you could probably get a win at Tennessee. I mean, it's on the road, but they're not very good. Maybe you could get a win on the road at Missouri. Maybe you could mess around against a team like Auburn at home in November and beat them. You did it last year. And all of a sudden you start to see a 6-win bowl game season come around. And for Shane Beamer to do that in his first year would be nearly a miracle just because of what he had to take over and the schedule he's facing, though. So it all depends on those first 4 games. You get through them 3-1, they're going to do a lot better than expected. But if you mess around and lose at East Carolina, if you lose to Kentucky, which there's still that manner of thinking, Gamecocks will beat Kentucky. That used to be the case. It hasn't been in 6 of the past 7 years when the Wildcats have won. So you get that one and you think, okay, now it's kind of sets up. So I'll be able to really answer that question after week 4. But, to me right now, looking at it, saying 4 or 5 wins, which for this roster, this schedule, that's probably what it's going to end up being.
Gotcha. So this is really could probably go for both of you, but it's directed for Clemson, John. Connie Hayes wants to know, do you guys see any unintended consequences from the name, image, likeness stuff that's happening in college athletics, where now the players can take some money and endorse products, et cetera?
Yeah, I guess, is it unintended, probably negative is probably what you're saying. Consequences. There are worries. I mean, in terms of the booster influence, in terms of agent influence, those are things that the NCAA is trying to draw up rules to kind of keep those people kind of at bay a little bit. We'll see. In terms of recruiting advantages, I have seen articles about, Clemson doesn't have the biggest alumni base compared to some other places. Probably IU, where I came from, has a bigger one. There's more people there who can say to ex-athlete, hey, I got a business, I have connection here, here's some money that I can get you for doing X, Y, and Z. Does Clemson have the same amount of money? At the same time, it's a huge brand. Clemson is an absolutely huge brand. I would think that you'd be able to promote and give these athletes a platform. And I guess the other part is just, you could say Clemson specifically, but I think of it more at large. I mean, this is just a consequence of where, college sports were headed. I mean, once television got in there and all the money got in there, it was only inevitable that eventually athletes were going to be getting their piece of the pie. I mean, it's that they are people with brand recognition. They're able to make some money off of it. That's just the consequence of it. That was what we're heading in. Whether people are going to be that much more narcissistic now, or they're not going to be able to manage their time because they're out doing autograph sessions and commercials, I don't know. I mean, it's a lot of interesting stuff that's wrapped up in it, but we really have to kind of monitor it and see how it shakes out.
On the Gamecock side, David, what are you hearing about name, image, likeness? What are they concerned about? Are there consequences that makes the athletic department there nervous?
Well, they're working with it as best they can, Mitch. I mean, the thing that makes this so really unprecedented is that the NCAA had every chance in the world to come up with guidelines and to say, here's what we're going to do, but they didn't do it. I mean, they were, reactive instead of proactive, which is their habit. And they just pretty much, once the Supreme Court decision came down, they said, yeah, you're right. Okay, you can have NIL now. And just dropped it, on every campus in the country and said, you deal with it. So it comes to a case where the coaches, they have no idea what's going on because it's the kids and whoever else. All they have to do is tell their compliance issues. So coaches don't like to be left in the dark. That's not a great thing. I was talking with the men's soccer coach here the other day, and he said, yeah, 3 of my kids signed up to be barstool athletes. And I said, why'd you do that? And they said, because we got a free t-shirt. Oh, okay. So, kids are signing up for deals with Bojangles or what have you. It hasn't happened at USC or Clemson yet, but a few other schools around the SEC, there's been some media companies that have said we've signed exclusive $10,000 deals to do interviews with these, student athletes. So I think that those athletes are still going to talk to the rest of the press, but they're only going to talk specifically to this one outlet that's going to be paying them, and they're going to get exclusive content. So what happens if that keeps spreading? What happens if the kid gets a shoe deal that's not in line with what the university's already wearing? USC's an Under Armour school. So what if the kid gets a deal with Adidas and says, I want to wear my Adidas basketball sneakers? Well, I mean, what happens there? So there's still so many answers, or there's so many questions that don't have answers just because the NCAA said, yeah, you deal with it, instead of trying to be proactive in controlling it. But so far, so good. But we've only been in this thing for about a month.
True. Well, I can give one answer. The Post and Courier is not going to pay athletes for interviews. Never have, never will. So you can count on that. What these guys get, they do it honestly, and we don't pay folks for access or for interviews. But yeah, it's the wild, wild west. It's gonna be interesting to see what happens. This one's for both of you. Comes from Emily. Wants to know what are each of you looking forward to the most with the start of football season? And John, why don't we start with you?
I don't know. It's kind of weird because I was hoping for a normal football season. I mean, in terms of, access and being in front of players and being able to talk to them face to face, full crowds, that whole deal. With this Delta variant, that kind of makes things a little dicey. I don't know what football season is going to be like as we start in August and maybe September. So I would say if the Delta variant wasn't, causing some, concerns, I would say, yeah, it's just everything being back in person, being able to get that personal touch, and then big crowds, obviously being in Tiger Stadium is going to be interesting. But yeah, that's what I would say. But yeah, with a little bit of that caveat.
Gotcha. David, how about you? What are you looking forward to?
Especially what John said about being back in a full stadium. I mean, it was just so strange to not only be in a 25% capacity Williams-Brice Stadium, but to go into LSU last year and the stadium isn't full, to go into Ole Miss and the stadium isn't full. So I'm anxious to see everything that makes the games better, the marching bands and the cheerleading teams and just all the pomp and circumstance that goes into everything before and after and really during the game. So that's what I'm looking forward to seeing the most. And also, like John said, just being back out there. I mean, Zoom's great. It obviously allows us to get in touch with a lot of people. You don't ever have to leave your house, but what if you really want to leave the house? What if you don't like being locked in for a whole year and not being able to go to practice and talk to the kids and pull them off to the side and be like, hey man, what about this? I mean, that's where as a reporter, you get those relationships. It's really hard to do that over a text message or over a Zoom meeting.
Sense. So we've got a couple more questions. I'm going to ask one now. So kind of on that same line of thinking, so we talked about wanting to be back with the pomp and the circumstance, the game, the crowds on the field. I'll start with John. Who are one or two players that you're intrigued to see this year or kind of keeping your eye on as sort of Tigers to watch, John?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually in the newsletter that's going to be going out, just DJ Uwe Ongolole. I've been trying to remember how to pronounce it over and over and over again.
Hold on.
Yeah, I think I did it. Yeah. Trevor Lawrence obviously was the man for Clemson for the last few years. How good is DJ really going to be? I mean, we saw him in a couple of games last year against Boston College and Notre Dame. Looked pretty good for a true freshman. Kind of does he take that next step and become the star that everybody expects them to be? And then, there's a lot of other guys kind of that I look at defensively. I'll cheat and I'll say three because there's two defensively, Justin Foster and Xavier Thomas. I'm really interested to see how they play. Both had COVID issues last year. Both are back. Xavier, I think it was in the 2018 and 19 seasons, I added up their tackles for loss, both of them, and they had 35 combined. And then last year, you only get 4 from Xavier, who has a limited season, and Justin doesn't play. They're both back. That defensive line is going to be scary good with Brzee and Miles Murphy and all those guys. What does Xavier Thomas and Justin Foster add? That's going to be really, really intriguing for me.
Dave, the Gamecocks. Who are you keeping an eye on this year going into the season?
Well, Mitch, I'm kind of like John. I mean, the South Carolina has a few position groups where there's just so much unknown that, of course, I'm going to have to watch everybody in there. But in terms of specifics, one that stands out is Luke Doty, the quarterback. He ended last year as the starting quarterback. He was the starting QB through spring, and he's going to be the starting QB once practice starts tomorrow. I want to see how he develops because he took over last year where he needed to play. Colin Hill really wasn't getting it done, but he got put in after the coaching change, after Will Muschamp had been fired, and a lot of the team had just said, you know what, the season's a wash. I want to see what happens when he can get out there and play with a bunch of guys who's like, hey, everything's fresh now. They got a chance to do something great. And I want to see how he develops because in the spring, they really didn't allow him to run. And running is a big part of his game for anybody who saw him win the Mr. Football Award at Myrtle Beach High. So really want to see how well he develops. And Marshawn Lloyd, the running back, you know, all we heard last year was like, this guy is as good as Marcus Lattimore, if not better. And I said, I remember Marcus, and he was damn good. So, okay, let's see what we got. Second day of practice, he goes down with a busted knee. Didn't play the whole year. So we still haven't seen what can happen. And in the meantime, when he was out, back up, Kevin Harris comes in and leads the SEC in rushing. So not only is it how good is Marshawn Lloyd, but how's it going to work with him and Harris, you know, trying to split carries because Harris has done nothing to lose his position. And you run for 1,100 yards in the SEC, all against SEC competition in 10 games, you're doing something right. So you're going to have to get out there and get the ball in your hands. You deserve that. But now there's this other guy who was supposed to be ahead of you last year, but we never got to see it.
It sounds like there's going to be quite a bit to watch, and yet another good reason to subscribe to the Tiger Take or Gamecocks Now. Let's wrap up with one more question from Betty Hubian. I think I'm saying that right. She wants to know about the Olympics. And David, I know that you've been covering that in your newsletter, the Gamecocks and the Olympics. So first of all, maybe talk a little bit about what we've seen so far, and then her kind of second part of her question is, how do you report on something like Gamecocks in the Olympics when you're not in Tokyo, you're in Columbia, South Carolina?
Well, it's not easy, Betty, but of course, and question, but the TV, the streaming services that they do have on in Tokyo is really good. It just requires staying up to some late hours, which I normally don't have a problem with, but I do have an 18-month-old in the house, so that's always a little bit of an adjustment of trying to get that in. But there's so many Gamecock connections in the Olympics. There's 11 of them, either former athletes, future athletes, as in kids that have already signed with USC to come, or current athletes. Then, of course, there's the coach of the Olympic women's basketball team, Dawn Staley. So that's what's drawing the most attention. Dawn Staley has Aja Wilson playing for her. They will be in the semifinals tomorrow night. So if they win that, they get to go to the gold medal game. And then it's just kind of keeping up with everybody else. There was a Gamecock swimmer, a men's swimmer, who's actually swimming for the Israeli team. They got into the finals, finished 6th, I believe, but they did get to the final heat. And then there's a couple of track stars and that kind of thing competing for their own countries. But it's just kind of keeping a list and researching it every day. And then, of course, with basketball, that's always going to get the main headlines. So Dawn Staley's been part of 5 gold medal teams already as an Olympian. She's looking to add the 6th. And like I said today, it's a very different experience when you know that there's one result that's going to be acceptable. So she's got 2 more games to do that. I know she's very, very nervous right now, but she also knows she's got a very talented team, and they just got to go out there and win those 2 games.
It is an interesting thing in Gamecock land because probably the biggest star in the athletic department is Dawn Staley right
There's
now.
no probably in that statement.
Yeah, well,
She
yeah,
definitely
I don't
is.
think so either. Maybe one of the biggest stars in the country. John, what are you hearing on your end in sort of the Olympic sports area for Clemson? I know it's you're still getting your feet wet there, but I'm sure you're watching the Olympics.
Yeah, not a ton, honestly. I've been watching YouTube videos of Dabo Sweeney press conferences, and old games. That's what I have been, again, so still about to get here in an hour and a half, getting the life together, and then just watching YouTube videos on Clemson football. So Olympics has not been much a part of my life, unfortunately. I'm sorry.
Well, we'll get you up to speed here soon enough. We're coming up against 12:30, and that's we try to keep these to about a half an hour to kind of respect everybody's time as they take a break and a lunch break. But I did want to come back and just say that this has been recorded. So those of you who have taken part, or if you registered and couldn't make it today, you'll get a recording sent to you via email, so you can watch it later, or you can watch it again if you were just so enamored with the stories of Jon's couch. So we'll have that for you in the email. But you can reach out to any of us at any time too if you have questions. That'll be included in that email as well. You can find me at mpugh@postandcourier.com. I'm on Twitter. So is David. So is Jon. All that information will be in the email that comes to you after this. And of course, we really encourage you to check out the exclusive content and coverage that we're providing on Clemson and South Carolina athletics. You can go to postandcourier.com/Gamecocks now. If you want to learn more about David's newsletter, there's a 2-week free trial, so you can sign up for 2 weeks, give it a shot, give it a whirl, cancel anytime. Get a good opportunity just to test it out and see if it's for you. Same thing with Jon, postandcourier.com/the Tiger Take. You can sign up and 2-week free trial, see if you like it. See if Jon can keep you excited with stories about Clemson football, his couch, barbecue, whatever it is. It'll be great. Both these guys, I know I spent quite a bit of time with them in the last couple of weeks getting these newsletters up and running. They're both super passionate about the jobs that they do, and making sure that the content and the information they provide to you is of value. So let them know what you think. Reach out to them via email, reach out to them via Twitter. We always want that feedback. If you're not a Post and Courier subscriber, of course, consider doing that. If you are one, thank you. All of this happens because of the supporters and readers that we have, like you. So we're very appreciative of that. And again, appreciate you spending some time with us this afternoon. We'll have a recording of this, all the links to contacting Jon and David, links to sign up for the newsletters coming to you in your inbox here shortly. So really appreciate it. And until next time, thanks everybody, and have a great Thursday afternoon.
Thanks, everyone. Credibility is really all you have as a journalist. I've always kept that in mind throughout my career. I don't want to be an entertainer. I started down that road and it just didn't work very well. So now I pretty much say, here's the facts, here's what's going on. And if you guys have any further questions, please email me. And sometimes knowing the fans and writing from a fan's perspective about what they feel, that really helps you get inside the program and give a unique view from what other folks might not have.